I'll tell you a little story. This is interesting, fire in the environment. It's interesting. I started out in Shelton Ranger District, which was the steepest ranger district in the country. You know, very steep. And it was old growth, and in 1927, Forest Service made a deal with the Simpson Logging Company for every tree in the district. And of course, back then, crosscut saw, long process, but then they got into chainsaws. Now they're going fast. So in the mid-'70s, and the environmental movement was just getting started, people were saying, ooh, we better get this logs out of here before they shut us down. So they were cutting down this big, old, beautiful old growth trees in this really steep country. And I was on the fire crew, so we burned the slash. And the slash was, 15 feet. Easily 15 feet. And of course now it's the size of the trees that we cut for wood, but the slash was huge. And originally we were using a drip torch. That's what we had. That was our tool, drip torch, climbing over this slash with this drip torch lit, trying to start this fire, and of course we had dug our little 18-inch line all the way around it, surrounded by huge, big old growth trees, and they had totally clear cut everything. And then we got to light it from the bottom, and we lost every single unit, always spilled over, because that's just the way it was. And we were some of the first test case on how do you do this. So we're beginning to burn like from the top down, from the middle out, using different methodologies. So one of the things we started off was ping pong balls. We were the test case on ping pong balls. And the ping pong balls in that deep slash was good because they didn't roll too far, but if you got further down, they rolled way out of line, and torched off more. The other thing we did was the helitorch. And the first time, the helicopter pilot's name was Mike. And somehow the radio communication, it wasn't me talking to him, but somebody, had this torch, burning torch. It was kind of swaying around like this underneath this helicopter. And we're all, oh my God, what's happening here? And he's lighting off the fire, which is much better than us being on the ground in the middle of all that inferno. But somebody called him. He said, "Hey, Mike." And he pulled his mic up and he clicked the button, whatever the release button was, for the helitorch instead of hitting his mic or something like that. Anyway, the torch goes flying outside the line. Another big inferno. And we spent more time fighting fires than we did mopping up from the ones we had just lit. So it was just a disaster. And it was serious erosion. And I remember seeing in REI a picture of the territory, that whole district, Shelton Ranger District, of the worst human-caused erosion in the United States or something. It was a helicopter shot of it. Nothing would, because we burned it really hot, and so it sterilized the soil at least for a long time. And we didn't plant. There's none of that stuff, none of that thinking that is, much, much better these days. And we didn't know the role of fire. We didn't know what fire was supposed to do. I was dumb, young and just following the rules. So anyway, learned something about that. And my very first fire that I ever went on, I went through my 4 days of firefighter training, and then we go off on a fire, and we had this crew boss named Craig. I forget his last name, but anyway, we violated, I think, 3 of the 10 standard firefighting orders immediately, which was we were fighting fire downhill at night in a fire we hadn't seen or something. But we started digging line and I remember throwing logs aside, and I was in heaven. This is the work for me. And then we got it tied into the trail, laid back in the salal bushes and went to sleep. And I went, oh, this is it. I'm so happy. This is my life. And so that's how I got into firefighting. But looking at it from that perspective of the ecology and actually the role of fire as we were gradually learning. And I think from the perspective of a firefighter, the role of fire, which could be seen from our perspective if we'd done a little bit more analysis of what was happening, what could have been good for it, but it was these the scientists who were doing the review of it, and in between is the managers, the Forest Service, and there seemed to be no recognition of this for so long that fire was important. Fire played a good role. We had advantages, disadvantages for how you do it and all that kind of stuff. But more recently, and I don't know much about it because this isn't my subject matter, but there's a book out that pretty darn well researched from just the looking at it. I don't know, but it looks that there's some of the more dense places where fire has not gotten to is because the wind, there hasn't been enough air, so the density of the fuels in there is not allowing fire to take off. So I think we're just gradually managing our knowledge, and policy is so slow to take root after we learn something that I'm not in the business any longer, but I'm thinking that we're a little bit further behind than we ought to be. A little cutting edge stuff is good. And since I live in the middle of the woods and I'm trying to be a responsible landowner,